No, on that subject, specifically the historicity of the resurrection, you've got apologists like Gary Habermas, who has these minimal facts. So, what would you make of? I mean, what do you make of the argument for minimal facts? What do you think it actually suggests? And what do you make of apologists who try to use that to jump to this very sure conclusion that Jesus is currently alive?
In general, I don't have a problem with the facts themselves. I do have a problem with the language of facts in general. Even like calling them facts is, I think, claiming more than we can. When if you're actually thinking historically, then you want to talk about levels of probability. But given the amount of data that we have, it's a very small window that we're looking through, and it's a stained glass window where all of the data is filtered through the beliefs of the people who are relaying that information to us in the first place. And so it's very hard to get at kind of some like rock hard, fact, 2000 years removed with very little information to go on. So I would have a problem calling them facts, but in general, I think I could accept, the minimal facts are like Jesus died by crucifixion. Like, absolutely. If we can say anything about Jesus historically, he died by crucifixion. That's a pretty safe bet. And so that does deal with like the swoon theory. But nobody really forwards the swoon theory. That doesn't really get us very far. The one that I think is the most important one is just that the disciples claimed they believed that they saw Jesus risen from the dead. And that's, that there was individual experiences and group experiences of Jesus appearing to them alive after the crucifixion. And that's something that most scholars would accept, that at least some of the disciples did believe that they saw Jesus alive after the crucifixion. Now, what you can actually do with that historically, I don't think is nearly as much as the minimal facts argument thinks that you can. And in that sense, I think the minimal facts argument really kind of functions like a Trojan horse, where you get in the door with these kind of bare bones facts, but then in order to actually kind of cut off at the pass any suggestions of any other alternative, like kind of naturalistic explanations of those facts, you have to rely on a lot more than just those facts. Like, and a classic example would be if someone puts forward the hallucination hypothesis as an explanation for the appearances of Jesus to the disciples, the way that Gary Habermas or Mike Licona or any of those people would respond would say, no, that can't be the case because group hallucinations don't happen. Hallucinations are individual occurrences that happen in individual minds, and so therefore, like that they can't be group hallucinations. The problem with that, there are a lot of problems with that. It's highly debatable whether that really is true, because there are a lot of accounts in literature on like UFO sightings and then visions of the Virgin Mary and things like that, where people believe that they see, whole groups of people believe that they see the same thing that physically isn't there all the time. It happens a lot. But obviously the question is when we sit these people down, can we interview them individually and arrive at if we say, okay, what did the aliens look like? And you get them fresh before any of them have actually kind of coalesced on a story together, because the problem with memory is that it's often formed, like collective memories are formed communally, and the most dominant personalities or the majority, what they say kind of has a huge influence on what individuals then come to believe really happened. I think a recent example of this, I don't know if you guys remember, I think it was around the time of the 2016 elections, where Trump said that he was saying repeatedly, he claimed that there was people during 9/11 on TV, huge crowds in New Jersey who were, crowd of Muslims who were cheering and celebrating, dancing in the street over the destruction of the towers. And then because he said that, then literally thousands of Americans agreed with that and have this memory where they think like this really happened. There's no evidence of anything like that happening, but you have a very strong personality in Trump who is making this claim about this memory. And just the fact of saying that makes people feel like, people who that claim, sits well with their worldview, agrees with their particular blend of confirmation bias. And that's a real memory that a lot of people have, even though it didn't happen. As far as we know. So, it's something like that where memory formation is a really tricky thing. Just yesterday, I think I wrote this on Twitter, but my parents just visited and they have a story that's very formative to their faith. But it's an experience they had where they were traveling through a storm, and their Suburban that they were in was rocking back and forth in this storm. And my mom looks in the rearview mirrors and there are men in running shorts on both sides of the car. Looked in one rearview mirror, looked in the other one, and there are these men in short shorts, it's the 80s, and they're holding the car, and then the car stopped rocking back and forth, and they got through the storm and they were safe, and they were like, oh my gosh, this is a miracle. But I always heard that story. I heard them tell this story so many times, and I thought that they both saw these men in running shorts, but they just visited and they told that story again. And turns out, at least to how they tell the story now, just my mom saw the men. My dad didn't see them. But so that's an instance where even though I heard that story dozens of times throughout my life, for some reason I thought that it was a group encounter when it was just an individual encounter. But all of that to say, to try and make a claim that, to move from the claim, some disciples believed that they all saw Jesus risen, appeared to them, to move from that to say that can't be a hallucination because group encounters don't happen, is presupposing a hermeneutic of trust where we can basically believe word for word what the gospel accounts say about those group experiences, and that those are basically word for word history. And so it's an instance where the claim of the minimal facts is that, we're only making our argument based on what the vast majority of critical scholars, both Christian and non-Christian, say about the evidence. But when it gets down to it, they default to their evangelical presuppositions about that evidence. And they can't actually rule out naturalistic explanations of those minimal facts without presupposing that evangelical hermeneutic of trust.